Okay, so let's try this again. That did not work out so well. Good evening and welcome to CoalitionM Radio. I'm your host, Carson Lopez, and I'm pretty excited about this episode because I have a returner guest as well as a completely new guest here to talk about some of my favorite topics. But before we get into that, I want to address the fact that I did find who to contact. If you listen to my talk with Emma about the disability accommodations here on campus, I did find who to contact if you have any complaints or concerns about the disability accommodations here on campus. So if you notice or hear from a friend who is struggling to move around on campus fairly enough, whether that means having not enough disabled parking spaces, unstable leveling in the sidewalks, ridiculously steep ramps and elevator in the very back of the building, or whatever else you may see, feel free to send Jennifer Pfeiffer over at the Kelly Center a kind email at jrpfeifer5@fhsu.edu or call 785-628-4401. Thanks so much for your help. You'd be doing a personal friend of mine and fellow classmates of yours a huge, huge favor. Also, don't forget to like the page CoalitionM on Facebook, capital C and a capital M. And if you have questions, comments, or a potential discussion topic, feel free to email me at coalitionmr@gmail.com. That's all lowercase, coalition, then the letter M and the letter R at gmail.com. Now, to get the ball rolling, I have with me Megan Rust and Derek Steed. So how are you two doing tonight? Tell me a little bit about yourselves and how school has been doing for you lately.
Well, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a leadership studies student, and it's actually my senior year, so that's thrilling. This semester has been great. I'm taking all classes that I like, which has never actually happened before, so I'm just on cloud nine. Good. And I'm even excited, even though I'm looking into things for my future. So it's a good time to be alive, I would say.
Good. That's good to hear. What about you, Derek? What's up?
Well, I'm a physics major. I'm a third-year student here. Yeah, my classes are going pretty well.
Good.
Nothing too bad. I've only had one test so far. Might have failed it, but things happen.
Right. It's only the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
We're cool.
I can work back up from there.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad to know you guys are doing so well. So before I ask my first question of the night, I want to first thank both of you for joining me tonight. And I would like to also give a little context to tonight because there is some context. So I met Derek on Facebook, actually, when we got into a really cool discussion about feminism and men's rights after we both commented on a mutual friend status. So the status was saying that there wasn't MRA or men's rights activism until there was feminism, in the same way that there wasn't All Lives Matter until there was Black Lives Matter. So basically just calling men's rights activists, I guess, provocateurs of feminism, not really serving a purpose other than to troll. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to find out that me as a feminist and Derek as a men's rights activist, we have a lot in common ideologically. The only thing we couldn't really come to see eye to eye on was the existence of rape culture. So on that, I'd like to hear some of Megan's thoughts and hopefully dig into it again some with Derek, because I know he is an absolute joy to talk to about some of these things, and I think that's getting to be a little too rare these days. So I want to start by asking Megan, what does rape culture mean to you, and do you think it is prevalent in the United States?
I feel like rape culture is kind of all of society saying it's okay to take sex if you want it, to objectify people if you want it. It doesn't matter kind of if it's harmful to them or if it's not benefiting them, but you have decided that their body is more important to you than it is to them. And I think it happens on both sides. I think there's definitely females that do the same thing to males, and it's equally awful. I just think in society it's more prevalent with boys will be boys, things like the Brock Turner case, which was ridiculous, and things like that, where people talk about rape or they report rape and somebody's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have worn that, and like blaming somebody else for the person that they may have trusted, they may not have known, for taking things away from them, like it's their fault.
Okay, so that sounds pretty some abstract stuff. So nothing that you can really see going on. And when I know when I talked to Derek, it was he took it more literally. So things like Sharia law, where women are literally kind of cast out of the community if they're sexually assaulted.
Oh, no, they're stoned.
Stoned to death. Sorry. Actually stoned to death for being sexually assaulted just because of their...
For committing the crime of adultery.
Right. For, their concept of sex is more like it belongs to these two people, and particularly this man in the relationship. And so if somebody else comes in and invades that space of his... so Derek, why don't you talk a little bit about what you think rape culture is versus kind of Megan's version of rape culture?
Well, I mean, I take a bit more literal interpretation of rape culture as being a culture that would promote rape or condone it, such as, like, in a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, like what ISIS uses. It's perfectly okay to rape a non-religious woman because they don't have the same rights as... Well, they don't have any rights. Anybody that's not a believer does not have rights. They're seen as less than human. And that is a legitimate rape culture. That is something that should be fought and destroyed. But, like, in the modern U.S. or, like, Sweden or, the UK, I mean, the closest thing that I've heard of to a rape culture is, have you heard of the Rotherham rape gangs in Britain?
I have not. Rape gangs?
Yes.
Okay.
They happened in the city of Rotherham. I think it's city, not county. But, there were gangs of men that were grooming young girls and were, grooming them to basically be sex slaves, where they would find them and give them drugs and alcohol to basically make them submissive. Then, once they were too inebriated to defend themselves, do whatever they wanted. And they would groom them over time to the same way that you would groom any other, like, sex slave. And the local police, instead of arresting the men, they would arrest the girls as prostitutes. Because the local police was coming under fire for these men all happened to be of the Muslim faith. And so they were coming under fire because they were targeting Muslims and that they didn't want to be called racist. So they sought to fight the problem by approaching the other end of it instead. And that's not my opinion on the matter. That's what the police chief said is why that they did this. And that basically they didn't want to be accused of being bigoted, so they just kind of let it go on.
Okay. So what are your thoughts about prostitutes being arrested here in the U.S.? Is that kind of a different situation?
Okay. So the purpose of arresting a prostitute is to get them to basically tell who their, well, I guess in modern slang here would be pimp, but to tell how that they got into the human trafficking, and it's basically to put pressure on them to do it. I don't agree that we should arrest prostitutes, but, I mean, if your options are being, a sex slave or being in jail temporarily, and then hopefully getting out of the life, I mean, it's a step up, I guess, but it's not a good method of dealing with it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But basically it's seen as a stopgap right now because the police are kind of, it is a crime. I don't think it should be a crime, but it's a crime because it's exploitative in nature with how it's been applied in the U.S.
Okay. So I think that where both of your interpretations of rape culture kind of meet somewhere is that, this is just what I think, is that Megan's, though it's abstract and not literal, it's not literally in our laws that it's okay to rape and even sometimes encouraged. I think that her interpretation of it allows a safe space for your interpretation of it. So what I mean by that is, if where Megan and I stand on it is people are not quick to take a rape case seriously. And I know, and we'll get into that with you too, because I know you have different opinions about that too. But if people are not so keen on believing someone who says I was raped, male or female, then that creates a stigma around that, which can then make it okay for us to just kind of brush it away. Not literally, but, law-wise and things like that. And so I think that even though I wouldn't agree that we literally live in a country where women are documented as property and things like that, I would say that it's still here. It's still, the mindset is still here. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what makes it dangerous to us.
Well, there is one situation in which it is kind of legal, marital rape. It's really, really hard to prove, but if you say no and somebody forces you to have sex with them anyway, whether you're married or not, it's still rape. And in a court of law, you basically can't do anything about it. So you can't say, I was raped by my husband. And while they're not killing anybody, it is still saying to the other person, well, you chose to marry them, so this is your fault.
You're saying it's,
I feel
like today you can't go to court and say.
No, it's definitely illegal. Like, it's been illegal since, I want to say the 60s or 70s.
But it's not enforced.
What do you mean by that?
Like, if a lot of people that go into divorce proceedings or into a court of law because they feel as though they're being coerced into sex by their husband, and that's one of the reasons that they cite. Often that gets thrown out because they're like, well, you married him, so obviously you said, I'm willing to have sex with you. And so it's really hard to prove because you can't really have proof of that. And a lot of people don't take it seriously. Okay. So even though a law is written, a lot of the time, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily carried out in a fair way or much at all.
Okay.
Well, the issue is, with rape, the only difference between it being a legal and legal action is, the opinion of the parties involved, which is extremely difficult to prove. So most people, most of the time, on clear-cut cases if a random guy just pulls a woman into the bushes and rapes her, everyone's going to be like, well, obviously that's rape. But it's really difficult to prove that, typically marriages involve sex. That's kind of the norm. So to prove that it was coercive sex without the use of, physical assault or intoxication involved, if it's just no and they do it anyway, you can't really prove that without having some recording of it or anything. So that's why that a lot of times it basically gets tossed out, because it boils down to hearsay in a situation where that consent is kind of assumed.
Yeah, but I feel like assumed consent. I mean, I understand you can't prove it, but I don't think assumed consent is a thing.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you usually at some point during when you're getting ready for sex or whatever, there is that, okay, let's do this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that just saying, oh, well, we're dating, so of course she wants it. If she's drunk, then I don't know. I don't think that implied consent works there. Okay. I don't think that it's an implied contract that since you're dating somebody that you should.
I think what Derek's saying is that other people will assume,
right.
From the outside, people will be like, well, you guys are dating, or you guys are married, or you guys are whatever, in some relationship where sex would be kind of obvious to other people, to other people. And so, Derek, would you agree that, or would you agree or disagree that most people here in the United States take rape cases seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I've known people that have literally killed people over allegations of rape. I don't think that it's something that's not taken seriously.
Okay. And you're not saying that everybody does, but most people. Or are you saying that everybody does take rape cases seriously?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be people that don't take something seriously. I mean, you can't say that everybody. But yeah, the vast majority of people do see an issue with raping people.
Okay. What do you think about that, Megan?
I see that people say they have an issue with people raping people, but there's a lot of statistics that show that women do not speak up when they get raped because they know that an institution will not take them seriously. If somebody gets raped by an athlete, there is a high chance. At Fort Hays, I believe that this is not the case at all. I feel like they definitely take every single allegation very seriously, and I'm really proud to be part of an institution that does take Title IX so seriously. But I know that other schools, even maybe schools close to us, people will, even if they do report the rape, they have to provide so much proof, and that nobody believes them. And it's until you can prove to me exactly when this happened, exactly what happened, and that they're not an asset to our university, then you didn't get raped. And a lot of the times, the police might take a rape kit and they won't test it because apparently it costs too much money or it doesn't matter enough compared to other things. There's actually an organization started by the Bay Mariska Hargitay, and it's called End the Backlog because there's such a huge backlog of rape kits that just haven't been tested. And in court, a lot of the times it depends on the race of the person and how much power they have, but like it's stupid stuff like Brock Turner, where a lot of people believed, and a lot of people on that were in that courtroom believed, yes, he raped her, there is evidence, and the judge was like, but I don't want to ruin his swimming career. So his swimming career, which he might not have been that good, I have no idea. I don't like to look at his face. There's just something about it. Was more important than the fact that he raped somebody. And a swimming career shouldn't be taken that seriously over ruining somebody's life.
Yeah. Now, you brought up that it's really hard to prove. Now, in terms of criminal cases, rape is a crime that takes beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning that, like, since it inherently is due to like somebody's mental condition during the time of no, I do not consent. If they don't vocalize, if they don't fight, if there's no outward signs of that, then essentially you can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt. It just can't be done at that point. Now, our laws state that does not need to be done, which is pretty reasonable considering that there's other things like intoxication that can be taken into account, coercion through other means. But beyond reasonable doubt is why that so many cases, it's why that people are like, oh, the cases aren't taken seriously. No, the cases are taken seriously. It's just beyond a reasonable doubt is exactly that. Beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not you're 99% certain. It's you are 100% certain that this happened.
But if a school official won't take you seriously when you report something, so you can't take it any further because they said, well, it doesn't, you...
Don't report it to a school official, report it to the police.
And if there's a lot of people that report it to the police, and the police are like, okay, whatever, and then they don't test the kids. Rape kits are really extensive, and they're very, very... It's very in-depth and very traumatizing to a woman. So taking that rape kit is a huge step. But there are times when, well, number one, you should be able to report to your school that you got raped by somebody and they should take you seriously because that's the law.
Well, that's the inappropriate place to take it. It's a criminal matter. Take it to the police.
If you get raped by a student on campus, though, you should feel like your institution would follow the law, I would think.
I mean, if you get mugged on campus, you should still take it to the police. That's a police matter, not a school matter.
So you don't think that we should report rapes to the campus if you get raped on campus? If you get raped in a residence hall?
If you get raped in, like, the Empire State Building, do you go and tell whoever runs the Empire State Building that you got raped? No, you call the cops. It's a legal matter. You're claiming a crime has been committed against you. You call the cops. They are the ones that are equipped to handle it.
I feel like you should be able to talk to your school, though. Because there's a lot of, that's what, if you see something, say something, so you might not be able to report it to the cops immediately, but you can have somebody that's supporting you while you're going to the cops. Because it's really traumatic, so...
I'm not saying you shouldn't seek support. I'm just saying that, like, they shouldn't, like, the school shouldn't be your primary, like, way of reporting it. You should go to the police because they're the ones that are meant to take care of this. That's why we have police officers.
So I see what you're saying, Derek.
Yeah.
But so here's the. Ideally, you're right, I think. But here's the issue: is that the first people that residents, especially in res halls, if it happened there or if there are residents there, the first people they usually tell are not the police. It's usually their RAs or
Yes.
their hall
I think they're called
directors.
like outcry witnesses.
Who is?
The first person you tell about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was an RA last year, and so we were told that could be something that a student comes up or a resident of yours comes up and wants to talk to you about. And so we had to kind of be prepared to say, okay, well, are you aware that I'm a mandated reporter? I do have
Well,
to tell my
yeah.
hall director. Okay. And so realistically, the school is the first person or the first people to know. They are going to know about it either way because they have to know what's going on in their campus.
Yes. I'm not saying you shouldn't tell the school. I'm just saying that
I think you did, though. I think you did say, when Megan said, do you think we shouldn't tell the school? You said, no, I think
Oh.
we should tell the
Well,
police.
okay, it's a legal matter. We have a legal
I
system.
don't think that's in
Schools are
question.
not part of the legal system.
I mean,
you sh-
you don't think they're responsible for something if there are 12 muggings a day on their campus, you don't think they should probably get involved and try to
Well, yeah.
do something? Okay.
yeah, they should definitely try to dissuade muggings and rapes and stuff.
Sure.
That's
So
obviously
you do
an
think
issue.
they play a role?
Yeah.
So where is the discrepancy between them being notified and the police being notified first? Why does it matter to you who's told first?
Oh, I don't care who's told first. All that
Okay.
matters is that the police are alerted to it.
Right, and they always are,
Yeah.
especially if the school knows about it first.
Yeah.
They will immediately note the... Right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if you're in any position where you're getting paid by the university, which has been interesting because sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. In my life, as a student here, you're a mandated reporter.
Okay.
So you
Well,
have to report it to the police.
If anybody outcries to you, you should probably report it to the police, because if you don't report it to the police, then technically you're an accomplice to the crime. Because you know about it and didn't report it.
That's interesting. Even
Yeah.
if it's a case of rape and somebody just... even if you're a student?
I mean, if you witness a mugging and you don't call the cops, it falls under...
Right, but if someone tells you I was just mugged and you don't tell anybody, they're not going to arrest you.
Well,
Unless you, I guess, witness someone being
Yeah.
raped? Is that what
yeah,
you're talking
but
about?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But, I mean, you should probably tell the cops anyway. Like...
Well, yeah, I don't think that's into question.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I think we would all agree that legally it is a very, very tricky crime to prove, literally.
I think it actually falls under a Good Samaritan clause. Like, if you don't
Yeah, I know
report
what you're
crimes
talking
that you see being
Yeah.
committed,
I think, yeah.
it's...
But it's
Yeah,
just
I know
like
what you're talking
if you
Yeah, it's
tell
like a
people.
misdemeanor.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that where you guys will split hairs is the social aspect around rape and what other people looking at a police report or seeing that somebody they don't really know but know of on campus being assaulted, whether that's male or female. I think the social aspect, what do people think about it? What are they saying? Because that has an effect on what are people who are put in juries going to think? What are people who are put up in judges going to think? Because, if you come from a place where rape is absolutely, unequivocally unacceptable, there is no reason for the man or woman to ever be invaded like that physically, then I think you're likely to be a very harsh judge when you hear cases like that. Whereas, the opposite, it's vice versa. Do you think that the social roles that we see playing out here have any effect on things like that?
Well, I mean, when it comes to judges, they shouldn't actually allow any of their biases to show through in their
I
proceedings.
understand, Derek, but we're talking about
Nobody
real
can
people.
actually do that,
Right.
though.
Right.
So, yeah, like, the surrounding culture is going to affect it, especially if somebody has very strong feelings on the matter.
Yeah. Okay.
But, like, in a legal sense, they really shouldn't let that color their judgment of the
Right.
issue.
I understand that, legally and ideally we want all these things to be true, but I want to
Yeah.
look at what's actually true. I want to look at what people are actually saying and what's going on
Well,
here, on campus.
I mean, why don't we narrow it down a little so I can
Yeah.
be more clear on, like,
Yeah.
what you want me to discuss about? Because just,
Yeah.
like, the social aspect of it is a little vague.
Okay, so is somebody here, not police, not the school, not like people of authority, it's just a student, Megan, me, or you, are we more likely to hear about a recent and local, let's say, campus sexual assault situation? Are we more likely to be like, but I heard that she was kind of persuade, like egging him on, or are we more likely to be like, that's absolutely awful, I hope that she gets help, I hope that he gets punished, whatever? What do you think? That's what I mean by the social aspect. What are people saying? And what are people thinking? Because that's where the culture aspect comes into it, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I mean, I've never heard of stuff like this going on around campus, so I wouldn't know, like,
It has.
among
Yeah.
peers what. I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't. I'm just saying
Right,
I've
yeah.
never heard of it.
Yeah, I understand.
But I mean, I think it varies with the situation.
What do you mean by that?
Like, it basically how much doubt the situation throws into it, because, you know, if it kind of comes back to that, like, is it reasonable to assume that, like, it's just, no, this was clearly rape, or
Yeah,
no,
okay.
this was clearly
So what
consent.
is without a doubt to
And-
you?
Well, I mean, the obvious things like grabbed from a bush, but
Okay, and what if it's
when
more-
it's what two people do behind closed doors, there's going to be a lot of hearsay on that. There's going to be a lot of doubt based off of people's own experiences with what's going on with that, what people think of both parties involved. It's really hard to make a claim on, like, and like it varies from case to case, and like the facts of it to the facts of it. It'd be really hard for me to make a judgment call. But on something like oh, it happened at like one of the big drunken parties, like the guy groped her on the couch, I think that most people would be like, well, that's kind of a shitty thing to do, isn't that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think another part of this that may not necessarily go into the legal side of things, though, is the justice side of things. Because one of the things that happens with when you report a rape on campus, it doesn't have to be proven without a doubt that it happened for a student to get expelled or to lose a scholarship. Because most of the time when rape allegations are made, it's because somebody got raped. There's this really big stigma that says that people lie about it to get attention, but that doesn't really happen because it's awful when you say that you've gotten raped. Like, it's not a happy time for anybody, and it's not good attention, and it's not attention that makes you feel any kind of affirmed. And so a lot of the things are that he took something so important away from me, and now he is getting a punishment that is tangible, because a lot of people, when they get a slap on the wrist, they're like, okay, whatever, and then they go to a party and they're like, well, see, I had heard this, but like, I don't think she's gonna say anything, so I think it's fine.
Well,
So I think that's the other part of it, is that it's not always just criminal convictions, because it's very difficult, and sometimes they don't actually go in front of a jury, so it might just be the judge. But there's that other aspect of the justice of knowing that you've been heard and that it is understood that you have been violated, that I think is important to a lot of people who have survived rape, because when you're told over and over and over again, it didn't happen, it's basically saying you're not worth listening to, which is part of that rape culture, that when people get raped, they don't want to talk because they think that people are going to tell them that it didn't happen.
well, you made a lot of points there, and I'd like to unpack them in the order that you brought them up. So you brought up the fact that people can be expelled without having any actual criminal charges
Yeah.
proven against them, and you call that justice. And I would like to point out that our legal system was developed with the sole purpose of achieving justice in mind, and extrajudicial punishments are not justice. They are exactly that. It's kind of like vigilantism. Is that justice? Is it justice
But it's
on
still
an
like
allegation to go out and beat a man?
It's still an institution, though. It's a government institution, so it's not like...
But they're not a legal institution.
But
And if there's no charges that were proven, they should not take action.
Are you saying that going and beating up a man is the same thing as expelling him from a school where he committed a crime? Or no?
Well, if he's not found guilty, then they don't have grounds for
Okay.
dismissal.
They dismissed... I know last year there was a student that had been... he was under investigation for distribution of child pornography, and he immediately got expelled. He hasn't been proven of it yet, because he's very good with computers, and he is very good at hiding those kinds of things, but there was reasonable amount of proof that he was committing this crime, and the university did not want to be, they didn't want to be attached to his name in any way. And
Okay, so this kind of gets into like university motive,
Yeah.
yeah, and
not
I
so
think
much justice.
I feel like it's justice for the person that got raped, but I can see how you
Okay.
wouldn't think it's
I mean-
justice if you think that
For the person.
Well,
the legal system is
Here.
the only person that can provide that justice.
Okay.
Okay, and now I guess this comes back to, you said that false claims are not made because it's an awful system. And you said that the motive that people say is to get attention. I would say that false allegations are not made to get attention, at least in the vast majority of cases. They are made vindictively to try to cause harm to someone. I know several men that have had this happen to them. Like, say how that our school, the guy you were just talking about, they expelled him. There we go. Sorry, I couldn't think of it. How they just expelled him. Now, if the school says, okay, any allegation of rape is grounds for expulsion. Now, is that justice? That a simple allegation is grounds for expulsion?
I don't think that allegations, but I think if there's evidence, then I think it's because
Wouldn't there be
Well,
conviction if there was evidence?
well,
Not
they
necessarily
can't
due
prove it
to the-
beyond a reasonable
Okay.
doubt.
yeah,
That's why a lot of
which
Okay.
there's a lot of on both sides. Like he didn't actually do it, but he went to jail, or he did it and he didn't go to jail, or
Okay.
she,
Yeah.
or they, however, whoever
which
it
the
is.
school has a lower preponderance of evidence that basically stands at probability. If it's probable that it could have happened, then they can enact punishments on it, and that's why that they could expel that student even though no charges had actually like been proven against him, is because they probably found that it was probable that he could have done it. Now, gotta say, if you get kicked out of school and because it's marked in your record, oh, it was an allegation of rape, that's why he was kicked out of the school. I don't think that's going to bode well at trying to get into other schools. And it's basically just, you don't get to have a college education now. And, which is what's happened to many students, that there are, I know currently of one case that's being appealed as high as he can take it, that he was expelled from school under a charge that was later dropped, but he was expelled anyway, and he felt that that was basically a miscarriage of justice to punish him for something that he wasn't found guilty of, and he's been trying to fight the expulsion because now he can't go to any other school because it's marked in his record why that he was expelled. Now, in terms of justice, would you say that justice was served there?
Was the charge dropped before he got expelled?
I believe so.
Okay, well then no, because the court of law proved that it didn't happen.
I don't think that it actually went to trial. I think that the charge was dropped by the plaintiff, not wanting to proceed with it.
What brand of law was being, like, what brand
Criminal.
of thing? I know, but like, was it like violence or was it theft or?
Rape. I'm not clear what you're asking.
Okay, so it was a rape case.
Yes.
Well, I personally, there's a lot of reasons why you would drop a rape case. And I think if it wasn't disproven in a court of law, like actually taken off of his record and the arrest, you know, like defamation of character or whatever, said that they didn't actually do it, there's a lot of reasons why you would drop a rape case.
Yeah.
And some people just don't want to relive it.
Derek, do you think if it is proven that they should be expelled or not?
Yeah,
even?
obviously.
Okay. I mean, they'll probably be in jail anyway.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
in the case, in
I
the
mean,
case
at that point, it's just kind of redundant.
in the case of someone like Brock Turner, who was given like 6 months and then was out in like 3, do you think they should be allowed back on campus or allowed to?
No,
No.
he was
Okay.
found guilty.
Okay, I was just curious about
I
that.
mean,
I
the
want to.
school has every right to refuse
Yeah.
service to anyone that they choose.
Okay.
I mean, being found guilty of rape is a pretty good reason to be like, nah, you're not welcome on our campus.
Right. I just paused a little bit because what we've been talking about is should they based on an allegation, you know, and you don't think they should, but you do think that they have the right to do that still based on like an allegation?
It kind of gets difficult there because
Okay.
if the school is completely privately funded, yeah, they can do that. But since most universities aren't, they're at least partially publicly funded, they should still kind of be held to the same rules and regulations that the rest of governing, like, state bodies are held to, and that they should have different restrictions placed on them as such. And I mean, it gets really fuzzy there.
Right.
In, like, where does the right to the school to deny service end, and where does the right to the student to not be punished outside of an actual cause.
Okay. So I really want to get into men's MRA, men's rights activism, and feminism in just a second. But I want to ask, before we put a pin in rape culture real quick, I think what I'm hearing from both of these sides is that I think there's a question of why do people sometimes not believe rape victims, and so maybe that's where you guys will diverge. So why do you think that people will not believe let's go with women right now. Why do you think people might not, I'm not saying most of them do, I'm not saying even half of them do, I'm just saying why do you think someone would not believe a rape case where a woman says she was raped by a man?
Well, I mean, you're going to run into people that are never going to believe it. Like, say that man has a wife. She's never going to believe that. Like,
okay. Why not?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I mean, you'd have to make a pretty strong case to persuade my fiance that I raped someone. Like, be pretty much immutable.
Because
case.
she knows you.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, would you believe that your father raped someone?
I mean, that's a bad example, but
yeah, but for most people, dude.
Yeah, for most people, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I think my dad's a rapist, but
no, yeah, just saying.
I understand where you're going with it. Yeah.
If you're going to have a strong, like, emotional tie to someone, you're not going to want to believe that.
Sure.
Because simple human nature.
So what about strangers then? What do you think?
But for strangers, it falls back down onto the like, probability aspect again of, you know, if it's, oh, he pulled me into a bush.
Sure.
I think everyone will believe, yeah, that was probably rape then.
Yeah.
But if it's like,
right.
basically,
when
oh, we
were
having
obvious.
a date.
Yeah.
He invited me back to his place. We, you know, were there. We were drinking.
It's a
One thing led to another.
situation.
I said no, but he continued on. It's like,
so
there's a lot of doubt in that situation,
okay.
and I think that's where most
private.
of that comes from.
Because more private. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So where do people get these standards of doubt and reasonable doubt and things like that? Where does that come from?
I mean, I would have to say from your own experiences with how things go, and just, I mean, it's harsh, but, I mean, technically you shouldn't believe somebody just based off an allegation. That's not how the justice is served. You have to take them seriously, investigate, but you don't necessarily have to believe them. You just have to see what the evidence says and go from there. Now, obviously, you have to, you know, believe their claim that it was rape in the sense that they didn't consent, otherwise no crime happened, because that's the basis of rape. But, I mean, here, with that Brock Turner case, that, I'm sorry, I cannot remember your name.
It's
Megan.
Sorry, Megan.
That's okay.
With the Brock Turner case, that's the one where that she was passed up behind a dumpster, right?
Yes.
Okay. Like, in that one, you could see where that people can get doubt if they, like, if they don't have all the information of what really happened, and all they hear is a girl woke up, like, behind a dumpster because she had blacked out, claiming that she had been raped while she was blacked out. Well,
what about, there were witnesses though.
yeah,
to the,
that's why the doubt died down. But if it's just, I was raped while I was blacked out, that can cause a lot of doubt simply because, like, if say you can't remember it, you just wake up and you're like, oh, well, I had sex and I don't remember consenting to it.
Well, the
That
good
causes
news
a lot
is
of doubt.
we have rape kits.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah.
a little.
But I mean,
little
rape
cushion.
kits can only prove that sex happened and, like, various aspects about it. They can't prove consent. is
yeah,
the
but
issue.
if you're drunk, you can't give consent.
Yeah.
So if you're blacked
or passed out.
Yeah.
or passed out, yeah,
Right,
then
yeah.
you
And a
feel
lot of
raped.
people don't believe that. A lot of people would disagree and say, well, I have drunk sex all the time. Why can't you consent to it?
Well, the good news is that our legal system does not believe that. So no matter what they believe, if we're putting our faith in the law, they say if you are drunk, you can't say yes. That's not how that works.
Well, I mean, we weren't discussing the legal system. We were discussing why would people doubt it.
I know. I'm just saying that the way that you take it a lot is if they're convicted of rape, then they're a rapist because you have a lot of faith in the legal system. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying like in obvious situations where it's kind of like, so if it was the woman who said I was dragged into a bush even though there were no witnesses, do you think people would absolutely believe that? Most people.
Yeah, most people would believe that.
Okay.
I mean, you
But in the case of being
you
passed
shouldn't.
out.
But most people are gonna be like, well, yeah, that's clearly rape.
Okay.
But like, it really falls into like people's own personal prejudices to like with that whole drunk thing. Like a lot of people disagree that you can't consent when you're drunk because a lot of people,
Yeah, no
you know,
shit.
spend their Saturdays getting drunk and then having sex. Like that's not an uncommon Saturday activity around here.
Right.
And so it like you're never going to be able to get everybody to, you know, always believe, which it frankly is a little like unrealistic of a goal. But I mean, the most you can do is try to get like as much truth out there and just hope that people will like be able to decipher for themselves like how that it played out.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can't really do much better than that.
Okay. Megan, why do you think that people would be more likely to doubt? If someone were to doubt hearing about a rape case or a rape victim, if someone were to doubt it, why would they doubt? What do you think?
Okay, step one, can we move the cookies because I have eaten 5.
Here, we'll put them.
Yeah,
over
I'll
by
take them.
Carson.
I'll take them.
So good.
I'll protect them with my mouth.
Yeah, I definitely ate more than 5 before I came here.
Yeah, these are delicious things.
I made 48 of them, and there's
You're
definitely
amazing.
not 48 in that box.
You're amazing.
So I have seen when people are judging whether they believe it or not, it's how much sex somebody, like if they think the woman's a slut. Because if I personally said that I got raped, people would probably believe me a little bit more than somebody who's had a lot of sexual partners, because I go to church every Sunday. I want to be a missionary. Like, I'm a good girl. Like,
Okay.
so they're going to see me and say, she is telling the truth because she wouldn't normally have sex. But if there's a girl that's promiscuous and does whatever the heck she wants with her body because it's hers, but people see that and they're like, oh, well, I mean, she has sex so often, like, obviously she wanted it.
Okay.
And then I think the other half of that then is the person that she's accusing. Because if it's somebody who's, you know, on the surface, a golden boy, like, he would never do this, he doesn't even drink, like, that's what his parents think, it's probably not true. Because
College changes people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they think, if people see him and they think, oh, he's an athlete, or he's an asset to something, or he works so hard, like, why would he ever do that? Like, he's way above that. And so I think that's a lot of it. And then there's always that question, well, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that one comes up when the police are in, like, talking with you.
I know, but it
Because-
shouldn't matter.
You think it should?
It's part. Well, I mean, it's part of the whole thing because, like, you know, if you get raped while you're wearing a T-shirt and jeans, it's going to be very clear. Like, you weren't intending to have sex, but like, if you're in the bedroom in your underwear, that's it. It helps solidify the case, basically. Is why that's asked.
I think that it still goes back to this whole thing. Do you know about Denim Day that we do every year?
Yes.
Do you know why we do that?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
There was a woman who was raped in Italy, and she was told that she was not raped because her jeans were too tight for him to take off easily. And so it was about what she was wearing, not about the fact that she was raped. And if I want to wear a short skirt, that doesn't mean I want to have sex. That means I have great legs, and I want people to see them.
Oh, I'm not saying that it should affect it or any way.
Right.
I'm just saying that it does affect how the people see the situation. I mean, you can say it shouldn't, but it's going to happen. I mean, people are going to form opinions based off of what they know. And like with the with the sluttier girl versus the, wanting to wait until marriage girl. Like, where that comes in is that people are like, well, it brings up doubt in the situation, basically. That, like, well, if she goes out and has sex every Saturday night, why is this Saturday night different?
And I think that's why my idea of rape culture might be a little bit different than yours, because I see that as saying that a woman likes to have sex gives people doubt, and the fact that that's a cultural standard, I believe, is rape culture. And so I see it a little bit more obtusely than you do, because you look at it more close to the law and to kind of proof, but I look at the wider things because there's just so many people that I know that have been so affected by it, and I can see how asking what somebody was wearing makes them feel like, well, I'm just my clothes. And so it's not the law, it's that people suck.
So let's put a pin in this
Okay.
good girl, bad girl thing for just a second. We'll come back to it. It's going really great. By the way, I love this. So Derek, talk to me a little bit about why you consider yourself a men's rights activist, what issues concern you the most, what it's about to you, and just kind of run me through it one more time and just kind of let our listeners know what it's about.
I mean, I guess that inherently men's rights activism is almost like inspired by feminism, because they saw the success of women fighting to make their lives better, getting equal pay, equal workplace, I guess availability. I don't know. Like being able to get
Voting.
jobs that used to only be men, like steel
voting
worker.
rights, things like that.
But yeah, and voting rights, which was suffragettes, not feminists, but yeah.
Yeah.
The men's rights stuff is both inspired and kind of in response, because a lot of the issues that have come up as a result of the feminist movement, such as things like, I would say the single biggest issue is divorce court, and how that it very heavily favors the mother, and that was basically codified in the law with the tender years doctrine, which stated that children in their tender years, which
need their mother more.
need their mother.
Yeah.
Based off of, basic biological need, obviously.
Okay.
When the tender years doctrine was proposed, it meant 6 and younger. Now it's been taken to mean all children need their mother more than their father. Which, if you look at our current, single parenthood statistics and our, divorce court, primary custody ratios, you'll see a very heavy favoring towards the mothers. There's also the fairness of rape trials in the U.S. is another big issue, because there are a lot of men that have said that they were falsely accused of rape, that destroyed their lives, and that basically there was nothing they could do about it, that they faced unfair conditions in court, and that when they tried to, once it was found that they were not guilty, that they tried to enact a charge of false allegation, which I know several men that have been falsely accused as well. I would say those are the biggest issues.
Okay.
But there are, other issues.
Yeah, I know you and I talked about also men being sexually assaulted.
Yes.
And the social stigma that surrounds that.
Yes.
Would you like to say anything more about that?
I mean, sure. I mean, the whole thing about men not wanting to come forward, which, she would probably say is rape culture, because they don't want to come forward about their rapes, I think has a lot less to do with the surrounding culture and a lot more to do with men's psychology of not wanting to appear weak. And that, most men would, they would rather just, you know what, it happened, just no need to go and bring up a court trial, can't do anything about it now, just move on with their life.
Okay.
And just put it behind them.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked quite a bit about this, I remember, in our messaging. So I think it came down to, the whole rape culture thing, where I was saying that is socially programmed into them, and you were saying that's part of their biology, is to want to be seen as strong and not
Men don't want to be
overcome.
seen as a victim, basically.
Right.
Yeah, they don't want to be seen as weak.
Okay.
And for the vast majority of men, being a victim is seen as having a weakness
Okay.
kind of deal.
Do you think that's mostly just for men, or for?
Oh, I'm certain that's why a lot of women don't
Yeah,
report rape,
okay.
because they don't want to be seen as a victim.
Okay. Just thinking for a second.
But, like, well, you think I mean, that's not really part of a culture. That's just inherent to people, that they don't want to be seen as weak by others.
Okay.
And they don't, and a lot of it is they don't want to admit it to themselves.
Okay. So do you think
That
that
it-
that it's probably prevalent in every culture, that
Yeah.
everybody who is raped is not going to want to be perceived as weak?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you see it everywhere in the world.
Okay.
I give kind of a counter argument to that.
Sure.
So I think that it is very social, because weakness, in a lot of situations, like, I have amazing friends and I love them very much because they love me for everything that I am, and when I admit weakness, often it helps solidify our friendship and we can understand each other better. And, like, when I'm at work, when I admit that I'm too weak to do something, it's just part of my job and there's no shame in it. And shame is not biological at all. Shame is because people suck, and people sucking is society, it's not biology. And so I don't think that that's biological. I think that's everybody in the culture saying, this is bad, so you think it's bad. But I've been in a lot of situations where being weak isn't bad, it's just something that happens.
So do you think shame in general is not biological?
I don't think it's biological, no.
I mean, it's an emotion. They are literally biological in nature. They are a chemical in your body.
So, yeah, I would say that shame is,
Well, it might be an emotion that you feel, but I don't think that it's biological that you shame people.
okay.
Like, you put it on somebody else. I don't
Okay.
think that's something that is
Okay.
just programmed in us.
I would say that shame is definitely a part of human nature, but maybe where we put it is not. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, so I think that what I'm hearing from you, Derek, is that it is, wherever it comes in, it is always biological. So every culture will treat something like rape with shame involved.
Yeah.
Just like they'll, treat something
Well, I
as
mean, you see it in
losing.
every culture. I didn't assume that then check. I just,
Yeah.
I mean, I never heard of people being like, yeah, I was fine with it. It's always
Right.
like, oh, I felt, shame about it, which is a very human response to something like bad happening to them.
To being violated
Violated.
in that way. Yeah. So does that mean that we might be getting back on rape culture already? I want to backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
So I read your paper that you sent me, which was about fathers' rights
Yes.
and divorce laws and how. And so do you stand by that paper still, their opinions in it and everything?
Probably. I
Okay.
haven't read it in a
okay.
while, but yeah.
I reviewed it just last night just to refresh my memory.
That was a good idea. I probably should have done that
That's okay.
too.
That's okay. I'll ask you about it. So do you still think that people who have been divorced should still get back together for their children's sake?
Well, okay. My opinion on it is that, based off of the research that I've seen, that a divorce is very harmful on children. That it very negatively affects them socially, economically, education, like in terms of their education. I mean, being the child of divorce is like one of the greatest, single greatest factors in basically every negative aspect that can happen in a life that, is obviously under your control. You can't really help if somebody like mugs you. Like, it increases rates of poverty, drug addiction, incarceration. Like, it's really hard on children. So, even marriages that are poor are still better than divorce. They found that, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like, from several longitudinal studies, meaning, like, over a long period of time.
Wait, hang on a second. So you're not saying that, like, I know you're not saying in cases of, like abuse that they should still stay together.
Even up to mild physical abuse, but yeah, you shouldn't. I mean, obviously you shouldn't stay because that's not exactly a good sign if it gets to mild physical abuse.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, they even accounted for mild physical abuse, and it was still, like, as long as it was, mild, it was still less harmful than divorce from several of the studies that I looked at, which
interesting.
Rather shocking to me when I saw that. But yeah, like, as long as there's no, like, really severe issue with the relationship, the whole, like, staying together for the kids is actually pretty sound reasoning. That it does help the children to not divorce until after they're out of the home.
So even if you are seeing mom and dad, something so far as screaming at each other every night, not hitting each other.
Yeah.
Screaming at each other or not talking at all, or just not wanting to be around each other, gossiping about each other, using the kid to kind of take sides. That's better than them just saying, Mom and I just aren't right for each other, and we're not going to go through with this anymore.
And I mean, that's what the data showed, but I don't know how well the data can really account for things like the emotional distress that will cause.
Okay.
But like, that's where my opinion on that came from. But I mean, if that's how poor quality your relationship is, like, I'm also a firm believer in that you should try to fix it instead of just like giving up on it. Maybe instead of going to the divorce lawyer, you go to the marriage counselor instead.
Yeah. So I think that relationships, especially in marriages, are a lot more complicated than just, we'll just fix it because a therapist can just tell us.
If your relationship is so poor that it would require divorce, maybe you shouldn't have had kids.
I mean, I don't think it was like that the whole time, or they wouldn't even be married. So
people change.
Well, yeah.
Like freshmen in high school, Megan and Megan now are completely different people.
I don't even want to talk about high school.
Same. That's why I'm saying we're so different.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people don't change, but I'm saying that like in for the children, the old adage of stay together for the children appears to ring true.
Okay. So why do you think that is, that children would rather see their parents still together but not loving each other versus not being together?
From, like, in the terms of, like, it helping their development, I think that it's more just plain functionality than anything, like, emotional. I think that just having two parents around is just overall better than only having the one parent around, just in terms of, like, straight time that can be devoted to the children, the amount of resources available, because two-parent households tend to have more income and more stable income than single-parent households. And just simple things like, if you're a single parent with a sick child and you have to work, that's really a big issue. But if there's two parents, it's a much lesser issue. And I think that it more arises out of the simple time economics, as well as other issues. You have anything to add to that, Megan? Kind of dominating the conversation.
It's fine. Well, part of it is that a lot of people don't go to marriage counseling for the same reason why people don't go to counseling is because of shame, which is apparently biological. Because people feel ashamed to, it's again admitting that you're weak enough that you have to go to therapy. So a lot of people are like, well, it's not that bad, and they would rather not do that. I've seen a lot of people like that. I was really didn't want to go to therapy for a very long time because of the stigma, and then I went, and like I'm blossoming now, so obviously it was very good for me. I think that numbers are not necessarily the best way to look at that situation, because I can see how, well, maybe there are more hours for a parent to devote to another to their child if they're sick, or they might be able to get them to school easier, but I know that psychological factors are so very important, because when you're around a dysfunctional marriage, you're much more likely to also have a dysfunctional marriage. Children of divorce often divorce as well. It's just like the cycle of abuse. It's the same thing when you've grown up around something. And so I don't think that being around that is good for a child, because they don't know what love looks like. Because in their house, they see daddy throws things when he's mad and mommy cries, but for some reason we're still all together, and so I think that this is what it should look like, and so when I'm mad, I need to throw things. And then and that manifests itself into worse and worse things.
Yeah, that is true. It's just that, how would you account for the data saying that you're wrong, basically?
Well, I think that, there's 2 people to drive you places. There's 2 people to pay for things. So money and the ability to get places. So they go to school more, they do better in school. They have more access to somebody getting them places. They get to do ballet.
But it's also things like, oh, I can't start doing drugs because my parents will catch me because they're actually there. Or,
I don't think that stops people from 2-parent households either.
I think that it helps at least. But, I mean...
I don't know the numbers on
Yeah, but...
I just know that if mom and dad don't like each other, they're probably not in the house together, so there's nobody there to see if you're doing drugs or not.
So let me ask this. Do you think that a better solution would just be to have 2 parents who have a good relationship, whether they're...
Well, obviously.
Whether
That's the best situation.
Whether they're divorced or not. Would that just
Oh.
be a better solution than forcing someone to stay with someone they don't love in a marriage?
If we're going off the data, no.
Okay. I'm not
unfortunately, that's just how it plays out.
Okay.
I'm not arguing that from, a personal standpoint. That's just
Well,
what I've
asking
seen
you
from the
personally.
data.
Do you think that... I mean, the data can show you numbers, and they can say this amount of people said that they were happy even though their parents didn't love each other, because they were still at least there, versus people who said, I wish my dad or mom had at least been there, because then I think it would have turned out better. So we can look at those numbers. That's fine.
Well,
but
you
there's
also have
also a personal aspect to it that you have to actually ask yourself, is it worth it to make those couples come back together? Whereas otherwise...
I'm not saying that they should be forced together.
in the paper you did say that couples, one of the things that the Fathers' Rights campaign fights for is to get counseling for couples who have divorced and to make it even harder, more difficult for couples to divorce in the future.
Oh, yeah, my paper was against no-fault divorce as being harmful to children. I don't care about it in, if you just do that when you don't have children.
Who did the research? I'm just curious.
For the paper? Me.
No, for the numbers that you got.
He has... You want to share? You want me to share
off the
paper
top of my
with you?
head? Yeah.
I'll share the paper with you later.
I mean, I wrote that
Okay,
a year and a half ago.
I just want to know the source, because there's also the danger of skewed data and inappropriate research methods.
I did look into the
it.
methodology of the research.
Let's just trust for all intents and purposes right now. that it's
I'm
that
very
it's
hyped. I'm pretty critical of the research.
I was just making sure.
Yeah.
Because there's the anti-vax thing, and that ruined everything.
Well,
so
let's not get into that.
Yeah, I'm very critical of the methodology of the research that I
just
use.
making sure.
Yeah. But oh man, what was I about to say?
So no fault divorce. You want more restrictions for people to be able to
because
divorce.
It's been shown that divorce is hard on children, and it appears to be harder than a loveless marriage and even a downright dysfunctional marriage, just as long as the marriage isn't abusive. And I think that a lot of it has to do with, there's been a lot of focus placed on the relationship between the parents, but in terms of childhood development, I think that the relationship between the child and the parents is much more important than the relationship between the parents themselves. That you're going to have significantly more time with your parents if they both live in the same house with you than if they live in separate homes. It's just a simple time economics thing.
Okay.
And
so
that it
Sorry,
helps,
go ahead.
Sorry, that it's going to help blossom that relationship and basically just help you throughout, as you're developing. That, studies have shown that 2 parents are better than 1. It's just is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my pushback would just be the same thing. You can look at numbers and say, well, they said, so this has to be the right course of action, but I think a lot of that also has to do with how people handle divorces. and how people, I think it goes back to like, you know, the question I asked, would it just be good if they just had a better relationship with each other? Not necessarily like a love relationship, but just a...
Yeah, just even a functioning relationship
Right,
is substantially better than divorce.
To just have a functioning relationship.
Well, even if they are divorced, I think is what
Well,
she's
right,
going.
even inside or outside of marriage. So just have a functioning relationship with the person you had a child with. Would you agree that that's better than any of those solutions we just listed? Divorce, not divorce, putting people, counseling, whatever. If they at least have a good relationship.
No, that was kind of the point of my paper.
So even if they can have a functioning relationship outside of marriage, you still think they shouldn't be divorced?
Well, that's basically what the data played out, was that as long as the relationship isn't too dysfunctional, that it's still better. Like, I don't, like, one way or the other, that's their decision to make. I don't really have much opinion on what they decide.
The married people?
parents.
Okay.
Yeah. But,
Well, I mean, you do because you don't think they should have no-fault divorce.
well,
So you do.
I was arguing against no-fault divorce as, like, an institution, as it's not good for society. Not
Right.
as, like,
Yeah, that's what
people shouldn't do it because it's not good for their children.
Right. So you do have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But,
You can
like,
say that.
But, like, in individual instances, like, if my friends want to get divorced, I'm like, well, you shouldn't, but it's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I think, like, you know, we can always do more research, but
Yeah.
the research that we have so far supports that it's not good.
I'm
to
guessing this
divorce.
doesn't really go with like blended families or anything like that after the divorce.
Oh, no, it checked blended families.
It did?
Yeah, they still earned as good as the original parents. Yeah.
I guess I just have really positive examples of blended families, so that might be
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, I think there will always be new ones.
That's why I think that it has to do with the relationship between the parents, because it's been very heavily observed that you form much stronger familial bonds with parents that you are biologically related to than ones that you aren't. And that's where I think a lot of it comes from, is just
Okay.
the, like, parent-child bond. I don't think that it has really, like, I mean, yeah, obviously the economics of time plays into it, but that mostly plays into
What do you mean by that?
only so much time one person can devote to stuff.
Yeah.
Two parents
Okay.
makes it a lot easier to have time devoted to children than, you know, like a single parent that has to work and take care of kids and do everything. Like,
Well, I mean, if we're gonna go with
Yeah.
how much time we can spend with the kids, why don't they just both quit their jobs and just spend all
well,
day every
because
day with
poverty's
their
not
kid?
good for them.
Right, and neither is staying in a
eating's pretty
terrible
good.
marriage. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Well, another thing that you had mentioned, on kind of a different path, because I think that we are not going to reach an agreement on this one. Because
okay.
I think people in this room have different personal experiences on all ends of it. Because like my parents aren't divorced, but I've seen divorced families and things like that. So another thing that you talked about though was men not getting, they don't get as many like guardianship rights to their children.
Yeah, custody.
Custody. There we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Primary
do
custody.
you know how many court cases go to court actually over custody?
Off the top of my
It's
head.
less than 10%.
No.
Which means that these cases were settled outside of court, which means that people agreed to it, which means that the number of fathers who don't have custody is because it was their choice. It wasn't mandated by a court of law. So the statistic of, well, men don't get rights to their children as much means that some men were not willing to fight for their children.
What about those 10% of men that did fight? Should they just be left out in the wind, or should they
I
get
was
an equal
doing-
shake?
They should, and I was doing research because I didn't know anything about men's rights activism, and I wanted to see kind of like what we might disagree on with me as a feminist and you as a men's rights activist. And I was looking into the cases, and the court system is changing a lot. It's being very much more revolutionized to a case-by-case basis of who the child connects with more, so the child often has a choice if parents are both fighting to be with their child. And not necessarily a choice because it's still like, you know, can they support the child? Is it a good idea to send the child with this person? But connection is taking a lot more into account. And so I was looking on websites where I was kind of giving advice to the fathers, more than just facts, because there's more of those. And often when the child is younger, yes, it's the mother, because the mother, you know, all of
Yeah. Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. But if a father
biological reasons.
yeah, but if
for
a
very
father
early
is
childhood.
involved and active in their child's life, then they have just as much of a shake at getting the child as the woman does. Like that's what's happening. Is more and more men are getting custody because they're not just looking at arbitrary things, because they're treating women as women
Well,
instead of just children.
You call into question my sources on my paper. I think I'm going to call into question your assertion there.
Okay, that's
like
fair.
where are you getting that from?
There
I think Megan does her research too. I'm
I'm not saying
think,
she doesn't. I'm just questioning.
Right. Well, we weren't
the
saying you
validity of
didn't
that.
either
Yeah.
when we were questioning the validity of your
Yeah.
research.
Right. I just I do know that I was looking at .org websites rather than just .com websites, and that is overwhelmingly, and that's what happens a lot of times in divorces that's settled outside of court.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my citations were .org and .gov too.
Oh, well, and I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I was just making sure because I didn't know. So, and it's fair, and I'm sure it's valid research, and I'm sure that there's reasons why those numbers came up, and that is the way that it is seen. And I know that there's a lot of special cases that I might be thinking of that the data didn't show. And so, I mean, I know that. And I personally disagree, but I know that they're numbers. So,
Well, I have to let you both go because technically we are out of town. But before I do my whole ending spiel, is there anything that either one of you would like to say before we go, or any last comments on what we've talked about previously? I definitely want to have both of you on again, whether together again or separately. It doesn't matter to me because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. But Derek, is there anything that you'd like to say last? Or
Just like to apologize to Megan for taking up so much of the time.
oh no,
That-
no.
They've heard
I felt like I was kind of
before, it's
talking a little
fine.
bit too.
No,
much of the
we'll
time.
ask you questions, so it's
Yeah.
fine. I wanted to hear
Gucci.
from you. People want to hear from you.
Okay. I mean, things might get a little heated, but everything's in good,
It was great.
in good fun.
Yeah.
It's just a nice debate. It's always really nice to have. I was glad to argue with you, Megan.
It's been an honor.
Yeah.
I think that it was really interesting researching men's rights activism and kind of the different things that were going on with that. And I'm interested because I think that a lot of it is very closely tied to feminism, because a lot of feminists they're misandrists, they're not actual feminists. But if you look at it, if people were being actual feminists, which I think there's a move more towards that now,
Hopefully.
it is that
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
should have just as much of an opportunity to be with their children,
Absolutely.
because that's absolutely reasonable, and men should have paternity leave. Men's health should have just as much research. So I am kind of excited that feminism is moving back towards men should also have these opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
Like I think a good example of that is Christina Hoff Sommers, who was, showing her age a little, but she was a second wave feminist. And she's become kind of like a big star in the men's rights movement. And that, at a lot of modern day schools, she's not very welcome there. At, like, conferences and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, her speeches have been literally, like, shut down and stuff.
That's been happening a lot too.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have a whole show on
Yeah,
shutdown speeches,
that's
so
very
that'll be
common
fun.
for men's rights organizations.
Yeah.
They get shut down all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the cookies, Derek.
Yeah.
They were amazing.
They really
My
were.
favorite kind of cookies.
God
This
bless
is
take and bake.
for sure. This has been a wonderful discussion, and to my audience, please come back next week and the week after that, because I will continue to bring on brilliant voices such as Derek and Megan, probably literally both of them, once again. Thank you for coming on, both of you, and to my audience, thank you for joining me tonight. This has been Coalition M. I'm your host, Carson Lopez, and I'll see you next time.